Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the sixth match in round one of the reparations, the international reparations debate competition 2025. My name is Jermaine Barrett, and I have the privilege of serving as the chair adjudicator for this match. With me on the panel are two eminently qualified adjudicators, and I'll invite them now to introduce themselves, beginning with Jordana. Thank you very much, Jordana, and Joshua, over to you. Oh, yes, it was so good, Joshua. Such a pity you weren't able to catch it live. But again, you can watch the recording. All right, so let's get to meet our team. So we have on-side proposition, the team from Jamaica, the tourist city of Jamaica, tourist capital of Jamaica, Montego Bay High School for girls, and they are going up against. Oh, I'm told we weren't able to hear you, Joshua. Do you want to try again, introducing yourself?
My name is Joshua Hopkins. I will be serving as a wing adjudicator for today. I look forward to an intense clash of ideas because I know that the last match was extremely fiercely contested. So I look forward to this match continuing that momentum.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And you must be wondering, audience, how did Jeremy know that about Joshua when you weren't able to hear? Well, Joshua and I are in the same space generally. And so when he introduced himself originally, I was able to hear. Anyway, listeners, we are also joined, and viewers rather, we are also joined by two, dare I say, Titanic teams from the tourist capital of Jamaica, Montego Bay High School for Girls. They are in proposition, and in opposition is a team from Trinidad, that's St. Joseph's Covenant High School. They're out of Port of Spain in the capital city of Trinidad and Tobago. And so let us get to meet our debaters, beginning with the proposition team, Montego Bay High School. Please unmute your microphone and introduce yourselves. All right. Thank you very much, Montego Bay High School for Girls. And you're going up against St. Joseph's Covenant, Port of Spain. We now invite that team to introduce themselves in the order in which they'll be presenting.
Hi, this is St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. I'm the first speaker, Julianne Solomon.
Hi, my name is Christina Baca, and I'm the second speaker.
I'm Ileana Chapman, and I'm the third speaker.
Thank you very much, St. Joseph's, for your introduction and for introducing us to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have some partners and sponsors who we'd want to highlight. And so I'm now going to invite Jordina Denton to do the honors of informing us as to who the sponsors of the International Reparations Debate Competition 2025 are. Jordina, over to you.
CARICOM, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the University of the West Indies, the Center for Reparation Research, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE, the Repair Campaign, the PJ Patterson Institute for Africa, Caribbean Public Policy, and the University of Hull.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, our debate is guided by the motion. This House believes that reparations for enslavement. All right, thank you. So before I introduce the motion officially, I'm going to call upon Montego Bay High School to reintroduce themselves. I gather you were not being displayed on the screen when you were being introduced. So Montego Bay High School, please introduce yourselves. Of course, Montego
My apologies.
Bay
Are
High
we visible and
School,
are we being
they
heard now?
are the yes, I believe you are.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Are we being seen and heard?
Yes, you are. Montego Bay High School, you are being seen and heard. It seems Montego Bay High School, they are not hearing me. Are you hearing me, Montego Bay High School? All right, so we are going to pause. I'm just going to ask the technical team to allow us to pause to sort out a technical issue that we seem to be having with Montego Bay High School, the proposing team. And once we've sorted that out, we'll resume with our debate.
Good afternoon again. Are we being seen and heard? Much. So again, we are the Montego Bay High School's debate team. My name is Brianna Barker, and I am the first speaker.
My name is Nicola Brown, and I am the Deputy Prime Minister, second speaker. And my name is Vanessa Clayton, third speaker.
All right, thank you very much, Montego Bay High School. Thank you for introducing yourselves to us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the motion for this debate reads as follows. This House believes that reparations should be a state obligation, not an individual one. Again, the motion reads, this House believes that reparations for slavery should be a state obligation, not an individual one. At this time, I call upon the Honorable Prime Minister from Montego Bay High School, the first debater in this match, to open the debate. Hear, hear.
Am I being seen and heard still?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Please tell me when I can start.
You may begin now.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable adjudicators and esteemed members of the opposition, where do we draw the line? The line of accountability, accountability for the millions of lives uprooted, shackled, devalued, brutally murdered. Today, the proposition team seeks to draw this line once and for all. We sit here unequivocally supporting the mood. This House believes that reparations for slavery should be a state obligation and not an individual one. Before I go any further, allow me the liberty to define a few key terms. Reparations in this context is defined as measures to redress the historical injustices of slavery, genocide, colonialism, aiming for a comprehensive approach that goes beyond monetary compensation. In addition, let us note the difference in state obligation and individual obligation. State obligation is the perspective that asserts that the government has a legal duty of state to make full reparations for injustices and injuries, which is only fitting seeing that slavery was a government-sanctioned practice deemed legal at the time. While individual obligation is the notion that private entities or families that directly benefited from slavery should be held responsible for reparations by choice or personal morals. As the first speaker of the proposition team, I will bring forth two distinct arguments. One, slavery was an institutional crime, so the remedy must be institutional as well. Two, individual obligation of reparations is impractical and inequitable, while state obligation reaps real justice. My second speaker will expand on the state's ability to provide these resources, while our third speaker will summarize and solidify our points. Let's get one thing straight. Slavery wasn't an accident. It was systemic, it was legally enforced, and it was economically driven. It was a crime against humanity by the state. According to The Guardian, a reputable US-based news outlet, King Charles I of Spain in 1518 granted a monopoly license authorizing direct Africa to Caribbean slave trade. King Charles II of Britain made the transatlantic slave trade a state-sponsored enterprise through the Royal African Company. And that company went on to transport more enslaved people than any other organization in the history of transatlantic slave trade. Isn't it ironic that both my examples bear the same name as the present British monarch that still heads most of Caribbean nations today? But I want to highlight another similarity. I want to highlight the legislation, real laws that wrote that my ancestors were nothing more than a barrel of wool on a ship. They had no more rights than a barrel of wool. It was the state that gave these individuals licenses, wrote the laws, gave orders for our African brothers and sisters to become chattel property. Now, if law can dictate such brutality, it can surely dictate and mandate European nations to financially, socially, and psychologically repair the damage that they have caused through reparations. State-sanctioned crime, so we need state-sanctioned reparations. Our own Haiti was forced to pay Haiti, the colonizer, modern-day $560 million for loss of slave labor. Here lies the truth. The victim pays the abuser. It is morally right that we correct this wrong. Colonial powers like France should be state obligated to reparations, just like they brutally forced Haiti to pay. Why give colonial states reprieve by asking individuals to pay when these atrocities have happened? The colonial rulers deserve no sympathy. A state crime was committed, so the state must pay. Individuals did not act in isolation, and we know for sure that wealth still exists in Europe, but not for certain. All individual families still have descendants or still retain their wealth. And if we obligate all of them to pay, but some of them cannot pay, isn't this another injustice in and of itself? If you take on the view of individual obligation, you deem reparations a charity. Reparations are not charity. They are owed compensation for a crime of slavery. According to CARICOM 10-point plan, reparations can include monetary compensation, but are not limited to that. What about debt cancellation, the establishment of cultural institutions, and the return of cultural heritage? No, opposition. Can individuals provide these 3 out of 10 that CARICOM continues to list? No. The carved figurine of Boyanel, an indigenous Jamaican artifact found here during the slave trade period, lies in the British Museum as we speak. Individual obligation cannot bring Boyanel home. It must be state sanctioned. Individual obligation of reparations is impractical and inequitable, while state obligation reaps real justice. Once slavery was abolished, compensation was paid by the British government to slave owners to make up for loss of property. This is the same state that the opposition wishes to give reprieve and let individual families choose to pay out of feigned moral capacity. They paid slave masters, but they cannot allot reparations to Caribbean nations or slave descendants in the Caribbean. Identifying specific individuals that directly benefited from slavery is a complex and contentious process, leading to inconsistent and insufficient reparation efforts. But you know what was it insufficient? The sugar, the rum, the money, the coffee, the pain, the hurt, and the death of Caribbean people. The European economy is the second largest in the world today, $20.2 trillion worth of their GDP, while the Caribbean economy is $20.12 trillion less. We are less than 1% of them according to our GDP as a region. A significant portion of Europe's riches started because of the wealth accumulation through the transatlantic slave trade. It is not certain that individual families have enough wealth to support reparations that the Caribbean needs. If it is not sufficient, it is unjust. But Europe has our cultural heritage on glass panels in museums. It is still at the top of our political systems wrapped around our fingers and has our people fighting against each other rather than them. State-led initiatives can systematically address the widespread socioeconomic disparities resulting from slavery through coordinated policies and programs. The result, imagine a Jamaica or a Trinidad breaking the chains of colonial powers that are still stringent today through our debt, our dependence, and our economic fragility. I leave you with this. Draw the line of accountability of European monarchies. Our ancestors weren't afforded sympathy. Colonizers shouldn't be afforded any either. Let the impact of reparations be as obvious as the impact of slavery, like lifting a foot off a very sore neck. Thank you.
We thank the first speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls, just to advise the debaters or debaters, if you have a point of information that you wish to ask, simply unmute your device and say point of information. Right, so that's how we get the other team to understand that the of information is in fact being asked. All right, so thanks again to the Prime Minister. We now call upon the leader of the opposition from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, to present their opening remarks. Here.
Okay. Can I begin now?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay. So while European governments did play a role in overseeing the system of slavery, the slave trade, and colonialism, the real actual wealth that was generated from these systems came from who? Private individuals. And private individuals doesn't just include families or people who would have owned slaves. No, this refers to families, yes, but also firms, companies, banks, investors, shareholders, and even religious institutions like the Catholic Church, which may not necessarily be associated with any particular country. These private entities built generational wealth through slavery, and it's this wealth that continues to benefit them today. Should they just be allowed to receive no punishment simply because they are not now located in that European country today? No. Reparations should come from those private entities whose wealth is traceable to the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, rather than modern taxpayers who had no direct involvement in slavery at all. You mentioned the royal families of Spain and England, but they are private entities. They are not the government today. Should they not be held accountable? Furthermore, you assert the fact that it is the individual's company's choice or moral obligation to pay reparations when this is not necessarily so. They can be held accountable through licensing and fines by the government and forced to pay reparations.
Point of information.
Yes.
If they are held accountable by the state, then that is state obligated reparations. That is not individual. If they
Not
are held
necessarily, because
accountable
the state is not the source of where the money is coming from or where the reparation is coming from. The state is not relying on taxpayers to support this money. The state is not relying on any kind of treasury. The people who are paying, the people who are doing the actions, these are private entities, and this is who we are arguing should be held accountable. And while you are arguing that government should bear the responsibility because they created laws that govern the systems of slavery and the slave trade, in fact, it's actually local planters and assemblies, especially in the British West Indies, but also in the French West Indies, and certainly for the Spanish West Indies, because Spain's government was constantly faced with political instability and inflation throughout the majority of the 17th and 18th century because of the price revolution that ensued after their colonization. But anyway, planters resisted policies put forth by their governments, prioritizing their own self-interest and profits over the desires of the government. And we see this happening in several cases with the navigation laws of 1665, the Stamp Act of 1765, the Slave Trade Act of 1807, the Registration Act 1815, amelioration, and so on and so on and so on. The planters themselves, they feel they are oppressed by the British government. This is what they are arguing constantly. They resist, they protest, they do away with the proprietary government and put in place the old representative system to give them entire and total control over the affairs that are going on in colonies. Even at times, the British government puts in place measures of the slave codes that try to ameliorate the conditions of enslaved Africans or reduce how badly things are run. At the same time, planters refuse to listen, they do what they want. This phenomenon is best described by Charles Davenant, a 17th century
Point of information.
Opposition said that it was Spain that was subjected to the political instability and economic instability. What is your source? Who is to say that their instability wasn't due to our acts of resistance?
The source is from Columbus to Castro, The History of the Caribbean by Dr. Eric Williams, and in it he describes how inflation ensued after all of Spain's wealth that they collected from colonizing, taking gold or whatever from the different empires they found. This wealth, when it went back to the mother country, this wealth caused inflation within Spain.
All right, it seems we have just lost the team from St. Joseph's Convent, rather, Port of Spain. So we will, I imagine, pause and await their return.
Where did I cut
Just
off?
just a note, we
Um, I'll continue with the phenomenon described by Charles Davenant in his discourse on the trade and public revenues of England, 1698, where he details how colonies, being like offensive arms wrested from a nation to be turned against it as occasion shall serve, describing this issue that's occurring between England and her Britain and her colonies, where the plantation owners, the planters, the plantocracies which exist in these colonies are entirely controlling how slavery, how basically anything that the mother country wants to pass, how they are overruling it and controlling everything and turn against the mother country in a split second because they serve only their self-interest. Therefore, how could the British government be held accountable for atrocities which they themselves did not actually cause and made efforts to ameliorate repeatedly and did not even directly profit from? Every single piece of legislation that the British government put in place that even jeopardized a little bit the desires of the planters and assemblies which controlled the colonies was rejected, not followed properly, or faced extreme opposition until it was eventually just scrapped. It was very difficult to put anything in place effectively in the colonies. And this is why actually America is able to gain its independence. Holding governments accountable on a state level is extremely difficult because many nations with colonial history have powerful means of avoiding responsibility, as we have seen is done with France and Haiti. As France refuses to pay, is not going to pay, you can actually track down private entities to get the governments to make them pay through fines and the same means in which they do today. Taxpayers today are not the same people who benefited from slavery, and it's unjust to hold them accountable. Private corporations, however, where actual records exist that connect these organizations to engaging in the slave trade, and I'm talking about organizations such as the Royal Africa Company, the Dutch West India Company, Unilever, the British royal family, the Spanish royal family, the Catholic Church, actual information exists. Hard copy evidence exists which connects these people to slavery. Why should they not be expected to be accountable? JP Morgan has already acknowledged their historical ties to slavery and have made steps towards restitution. Additionally, Cambridge University does provide scholarships to students from the Commonwealth area as a form of reparations. So it's not to say that it's not possible. The responsibility of reparations lies with those who benefited, not the broader state or modern citizens who had no role in the past crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader of the Opposition, representing St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, for that speech. I know we now move into the exciting phase of our debate called the cross-examination. That's the first phase of the cross-examination. This phase will see St. Joseph's and opposition asking 3 questions of Montego Bay High School for Girls on team proposition. Please be reminded that a question is limited to 10 seconds and a response limited to 30 seconds. With both mics unmuted, I now invite the first question from St. Joseph's Convent of, St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain.
Okay. Do governments hold more wealth than private individuals so that they'd be able to use this for reparation?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Could you repeat, please?
Sure. Do governments hold more wealth than private individuals so that they would be able to use this for reparations?
Yes, and we know that for certain, based on taxation and the GDP levels of all European nations. We also know that all individual families or enterprises do not still retain their wealth from history. All of them do not retain their wealth, so thus their reparations
That's all I wanted to
insufficient.
know. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. I know.
Sorry, St. Joseph's, you must allow the team to speak for a maximum of 30 seconds before you interrupt. You may now proceed with your second question.
Thank you. Did governments solely control legislation on colonies?
Yes.
That's just a blatant lie. Okay.
If that is all Montego Bay High School in terms
What
of your
was the
response,
purpose
St.
of the
Joseph's, you may
old
now ask your second
representative
question.
system?
I'm sorry, what was the host saying? Mr. Andre?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Hello? Yes, I
Yes,
was
we are.
asking whether the response was complete from Montego Bay High School.
We can go further and
The
say
response
that
to the second
yes,
question.
all the legislation was from there because the British government had ultimate control over colonial legislation, and local colonial governments often had some degree of autonomy to make laws. I said in my speech about the King Charles.
Later, not true. Okay. I think that was.
Okay, we seem to have lost the audio from Montego Bay High School for girls. Montego Bay High School, are you still with us?
In the cross-examination. But why? That's just.
Again, just checking to see if Montego Bay High School is still with us.
We're back. Did you hear my response?
We heard most of it, I think. You dropped off when you made the point about King Charles.
So I highlighted that in my speech, King Charles I of Spain granted license. King Charles II of Britain granted the slavery to be a state-sponsored enterprise. So yes, legislation did stamp slavery as legal. So yes to the opposition's question, absolutely.
Okay, and St. Joseph's, you may now ask your third and final question.
What was the role of the old representative system and what did they do?
Could you repeat the old representative?
What was the old representative system? How did it function? What was it intended to do?
I fail to see how this is a question directly towards the moot. However, the old representative system in British colonies allowed local elites to have a say in governance, but ultimately authority rested with the British government. The government legitimizing all the licenses, all the legislation to say, yes, you can take Africans against their will from Africa to the Caribbean, you can whip them and brutalize them for them to work. And indigenous people as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, St. Joseph's Covenant, Port of Spain. I now invite Montego Bay High School to ask their questions to the opposition team.
All right, can we go ahead?
Yes, you may.
You argue that individual contributions can create the same impact as state-led reparations. Can you provide a single historical example where fragmented voluntary payments, whether from families or enterprises, have successfully corrected an injustice as large as slavery? For example, any genocide.
Nothing has ever actually done that, not a state, not anybody, no genocide or injustice has been completely rectified, but there have been many examples of companies trying. Some companies, including JP Morgan, have released official formal apologies. They've also provided scholarships to African American students. We also have Cambridge, who provides scholarships to CARICOM students, and this clearly shows that private entities are able to do this. Thank you.
So we're having some, I'm gonna still keep speaking. So the next question is that if reparations are left to individuals, how do you ensure that those who refuse to pay are held accountable? Did you hear?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
What you're sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically then they can be forced to held accountable by putting taxes on them if they refuse to comply, through fines and licenses. The same punishments that those companies get for breaking the law today can be applied to the crimes that they would have committed in the past.
All right, so that is agreeing with us that state obligation reparations is needed. So my next question goes, since we are focusing so much on finances, do you acknowledge that reparations also involve education, cultural restoration, and bringing back our cultural heritage? If so, explain how individuals rather than governments can implement that. For example, bringing back artifacts from the museums.
Okay. Are all museums government owned, and were they taken by the government or individuals? I
I'm
mean,
sorry, you cannot ask me back a question.
Many museums are individually owned, privately owned, not necessarily owned by the government. While the government may fund them or provide aid to them, they are ultimately owned by a board.
All right. Thank you very much to Montego Bay High School for girls, as well as St. Joseph Convent, Port of Spain. We continue our debate, this time with the presentation from the Deputy Prime Minister from Montego Bay High School team proposition. You may begin. Montego Bay High School.
Good afternoon. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you, Montego Bay High School.
No, come. Good afternoon. We convene here today because reparations matter to us. My worthy opponents, I can assure you that not every individual shares this belief. So how do we guarantee that reparations will have the transformative power that it requires if we leave it to choice? As said by the Economic Policy Institute, the International Center for Transitional Justice, and CARICOM, the transformative power to fight the very institutionalized system of slavery that has embedded itself into our constitution, our social institutions. Furthermore, reparations exceed that of money. According to ICTJ, they include the restitution of civil and political rights, constitutional reforms, physical rehabilitation, granting access to lands, housing, healthcare, education, symbolic reparations such as apologies, memorials, and commemorations. How does opposition suppose that individuals can meet both the quantifiable and qualitative value of reparations? As my first speaker affirmed, the primary beneficiary was the state. Additionally, only they have the capacity to correct the institutional faults that warrant reparations to begin with. I, as second speaker, will add to this and further tackle the impracticality of individual obligation. Firstly, it is state obligation, and they.
Has any state succeeded in obtaining reparations beyond apologies?
Montego Bay High School, there's a point of information posed to you. Is Montego Bay High School with us? Okay, I reckon. We'll just pause their time and await their return. Jordana, how much time has elapsed?
1 minute and 37 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Our point of information was that has any state successfully obtained reparations beyond an apology already?
Most definitely. Germany to the Holocaust survivors, Germany to Namibia. Yes, most definitely. Research will tell you. Continue. If I can continue, we were saying that slave codes, I beg to argue with the point that government or state holds no accountability. When slave codes of Barbados 1661, racism, as said by the Repair Matters campaign, was legalized. And it's true, repartimiento, encomiendo, asiento license that legalized the selling of enslaved Africans. Regardless of whether they were cut at some point, that was state. Additionally, we should remember that before those 3 ships arrived to the Caribbean, they were commissioned by Spain's state, highlighting moral obligation. You also made an argument that said that government, or rather, yes, the nation did not profit from private entities and their participation in colonialism. The argument assumes that because wealth was concentrated in private hands, that the nation itself did not benefit, therefore not morally accountable. That is not true. This ignores the fact that private entities operate within national economic systems benefiting from government policies. I digress. Further, international and precedent law holds a state legally responsible for its internationally wrongful acts. Hence why, again, Germany's state had to compensate Holocaust survivors and once again, presently Namibia. But it's not just this. We aren't vindicative. We appreciate more significantly the capacity that state has. They open the opportunity for culpative states to rightfully amend as opposed to individuals that cannot be traced. They will be the ones to formally present our case. They will commission the lawyers. They will go beyond the quantitative dimension of reparations and correct that of qualitative, making institutional change. It is their responsibility, not accepted at this point. Responsibility under governance, under precedent and international law. Remember, according to the ICTJ, reparations should be designed and implemented in ways that can transform the unequal and unjust conditions. Hence the CARICOM 10-point plan, where the resounding charge is to be taken on by the, and I quote, governments of Europe. Individuals would flounder with this task.
Point of information.
Not accepted at this moment, which leads me to the next point. Individual obligation is inconsistent, impractical. My opposition, what qualifies who pays? Should descendants of slave owners pay? How do we find them in this melting pot? The Honorable Eric Williams, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and Caribbean historian Bridget Brereton have recounted that many Europeans immigrated after slavery ended. Some sold their land and left. Further, not all of them amassed the same wealth. Do we and how do we find them? Should they pay? Do they pay equally? How much can they pay individually that will meet the holistic value of reparations? Which individual will organize this? Should wealthy corporations pay? Then why not just force the state to make them pay via taxation? Its inconsistency allows for discrimination and possibly civil unrest. It is impractical and allows for inequitable impact. Furthermore, we aren't asking who should make contributions. After all, our reparations are not a charity act. They are necessitated by historical injustice. Our matter of concern is who can make the corrections, who can ensure our justice. We stall our yearn for progression when we fail to identify and hold accountable a body that can lead the charge of reparations. Individually, we can contribute to the discourse. That's what we're doing right now. But what is talk without action? It was said by the Repairs Matter campaign that 49% of child poverty is a legacy of Belize's colonial underdevelopment. Haiti had to pay the state 21 billion for its freedom and is still in debt. What individual effort can correct this? The restitution of civil and political rights, constitutional
All right, so we seem to have lost the speaker again. Is Montego Bay High School with us? So again, ladies and gentlemen, this debate is being had online, and so from time to time we have technical challenges as we are having right now. Montego Bay High School just just left the call, presumably not voluntarily, possibly because of technical challenges. So we are awaiting their return. We're going to pause the debate, and hopefully they'll return shortly, and then we will resume. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So we are having some technical challenges, but I think we are ready to resume. We've just heard the second speech from Montego Bay High School for girls, and we're now going to invite the second debater, second speaker from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, and that's the Deputy Opposition Leader. Let's meet the speaker. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You may
Shall I-
begin your speech now.
Thank you. I would like to start talking about your response to our point of information regarding Namibia. 70% of Namibia's land is still owned by Germany. You responded to our question on what states have actually paid reparations aside from an apology already, and this is what we deem as suitable reparations that we want. Furthermore, Germany companies actually paid reparations for the Holocaust, and even if the state did, the Holocaust is a very specific situation in which the state micromanaged the atrocities committed within their own country. Furthermore, I would like to reiterate, you defined what an individual obligation means with regards to reparations. You said that it is only non-monetary forms or just, apologies or small things, but no, that can mean legal action. And that is a very viable route to take. As you said, these institutions can make non-monetary reparations as well. It's not just companies that can do these sorts of things. Additionally, these giant corporations that benefited from slavery, some of them are not associated with these states that committed slavery as well anymore. And if we do not target them, they will get away scot-free. The royal family, which you talked about, will get away scot-free if we do not target them whatsoever. Anyways, I digress. I would like to start by acknowledging that the true repercussions of the Atlantic slave trade and plantation economies that followed. The repercussions of these European systems are what the Western world exists as today. They lay the foundation of our society, the foundation of European and Caribbean societies, which are rooted in capitalism, racism, and imperialism. These are the repercussions of slavery, and no form of reparations could ever repay that. I mention this as many would argue, as you'll have, that if reparations were left to individuals, the systematic nature of these harms would not be addressed adequately. But as just stated, there is no way to address these harms adequately. Instead, we must settle the reparations from the individual entities who directly profited and carried out the atrocities. These entities and institutions were the tools of Europe in exploiting the indigenous and African people. Even after slavery was abolished, economic arrangements which allowed the further exploitation of Caribbean lands and people still remained. While they were facilitated by European governments, they were heavily influenced by corporations and institutions who had much to lose if trade in the Caribbean was cut off. Undeniably, the success of these organizations has in turn led to the overall success of Europe, but they are still the ones who directly profited and can actually be held accountable. Examples of these institutions, which have played a part in slavery, are Cunard Line, Unilever, Barclays Bank, and the Catholic Church, of course, just to name a few. This is not to say that European citizens have no association with the exploits of slavery, but simply that they are not. I accept.
All right, you have noted a list of certain enterprises, but that is not wholly all of them. And if all of them aren't obligated, then it is insufficient and unjust, isn't it? We cannot track down all of them, can we?
We have even more actually in-depth references.
Would you like to hear all of them? Many of them, not all, but many.
Many.
No, but what is being stated is how can we delineate all of them? Some have immigrated, some have died.
I'm sorry. You're not allowed to engage in conversation. Just ask a point of information, and then the speaker whose time it is has the opportunity to respond. Thank you.
My response is that how can you hold states actually accountable? I will address that later on more though. As I was saying, these citizens are simply not the priority when it comes to accountability. Carrying out reparations will be a process. Once the individuals who had a direct involvement in slavery are accounted for, we can discuss how everyone can get involved. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to really address what we want from reparations. Are we trying to bring down these developed countries on a whole just for our satisfaction? Or do we want our own developing nations to be lifted up? If it is the latter, why do we need to take European taxpayers' money if there are fairer ways of receiving deserved support? We must remember that this is reparations, not retribution. On another note, as much as we don't want to accept it, there is no guaranteed way to hold entire countries accountable for an injustice. It is simply unfeasible unless you have military force, which the Caribbean does not have. A state can back out of agreements with almost no consequence. Not even the United Nations can do anything, especially against European powers if they don't want to. For example, the United Nations can't hold the United States accountable for backing out of the Paris Agreement. Even the International Court of Justice cannot make much of a difference. Have they not deemed Israel's occupation in Gaza unlawful? Has that stopped them? No, it hasn't. The truth is that having states pay reparation is unreliable, especially since countries needing to pay them are more powerful and wealthy, making it impossible to police them. Now, we are debating whether reparations are a state obligation. Almost all European countries involved have already rejected any legal obligation for reparations. Thus, no European state is legally obligated to pay reparations. As said before, even if they are legal agreements, no state is actually obligated to do anything. Of course, one may argue that they have a moral obligation to pay it, but it makes no difference on whether they actually will or not. And that is what is important. The Caribbean is unfortunately dependent on foreign states to make that decision themselves. But it has almost been 200 years since Haiti's independence, on average 60 years for the rest of the Caribbean. These states should have made their decision a long time ago. In fact, many of them have, and we need to accept it. We need to tackle reparations from a different perspective, an individual perspective. It is possible to charge individuals in court. Not so? Is it possible to charge corporations in court? Definitely. I think the answer is clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second opposition speaker there from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. We now enter our second segment of cross-examination. At this time, St. Joseph's, you have the opportunity to ask 3 questions to Montego Bay High School. And of course, after you've had those 3 questions answered, then we will flip it and allow high school to ask 3 questions of yourselves. Both teams having their microphone on mute, we now invite the first question from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain.
Hi, may I go ahead?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I would like to ask, how much was paid to Namibia in reparations? I would like a number and a date, please. By Germany.
I'm sorry, I did not say that any was paid to Namibia. When I made the state, I said that it was presently being considered as the state understood that it was their obligation to give back to a country that they would have wronged, as precedent law and international law will hold them to that accountability as well. That is the statement that I made.
Thank you. My next question is, which state is meant to hold the Catholic Church accountable for reparations?
We are not arguing that any single entity should pay reparations. We're arguing that states should pay. The states listed, we have Britain, we have France, we have Spain among all of those. We have the European colonizers.
Additionally, we are saying that state has the capacity to impact and to cause the transformation that we need in order to accomplish reparations. Reparations are not just quantifiable, they are qualitative as well. That includes litigation that individuals cannot correct by themselves. It needs state.
Okay. Thank you very much. My next question is, what is the amount of money governments have, European governments have, that they will be able to put aside for reparations without crippling their countries?
European economies have the second largest economy in the world, worth 20.25 trillion. That is their GDP. Reparations are equatable. France asked Haiti to pay $560 million in today's currency, and that has been paid. We're asking that the state quantifies what they have done to us and repay to build back our economies that are so downgraded. They are still at the top of our political system, and it is controlling and bending our economies at the knees.
You did not answer my question, but thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions, St.
Excuse
Joseph.
me?
Yes. Do you have a question for me? Okay, proceeding. Montego Bay High School, you may now ask questions of St. Joseph's.
Hello?
Yes?
Hello, we're not hearing anymore. I'm so sorry.
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're
Yes, we're
hearing
hearing you
you.
now.
Okay, good. I was thanking St. Joseph's for the questions. Thank you as well for the responses. And now I'm inviting questions from you posed to St. Joseph's, Convent, Port of Spain.
So we can begin?
Yes, you may.
All right, our first question to St. Joseph's is, whose resources or money should be used to track down these individuals or entities that are not already known? Whose resources are going to track down who we don't know? Individuals?
They provided. We would like to answer by saying that this organization, actually, the Center for Reparations and Research, has actually provided us a source that shows people, and it's very in-depth. It's the University College of London, and they've traced families, organizations, and it's in-depth. Records were kept. It's not like they were bad at record keeping. Additionally, the records exist and they're able to be traced, and it's not to say that it's 5 or 10 people. It's an in-depth list of records. So it's not to say that it's not enough.
It is in fact hundreds of people, and our resources are already strained. My next question to you is, if reparations should be based on personal guilt rather than state responsibility, explain why enslaved people were punished by law, restricted by policy, and controlled by government system rather than just individuals. It wasn't just individuals on ships, it was states. It's a state crime.
Can you repeat the question?
All right. So I said, if reparations should be based on personal guilt or morals rather than state responsibility, explain why enslaved people were punished by law, restricted by policy, and controlled by government systems rather than just individuals. Why should justice be any different? State crime, state pay.
Well, then we shall ask ourselves who came up with those laws in the first place. The people who came up with those laws are the assemblies of those countries, the planters who actually own slaves themselves. Plantocracies were the people who put in place those laws that want to oppress Black people or enslave people, because they are the people in control in the colonies, not the metropolitan government. They don't care about the metropolitan government. They just want to do their own self-interest. They own slaves. They want to oppress slaves. I'm in the government because I'm the only white people on this island. So obviously I'm going to put in place laws that oppress enslaved Africans or Black people after they've gained their freedom. That is who are putting in place the laws, and that is who we want to hold accountable. Those private people, those people who own shares supporting those private entities. That is who we want to hold accountable for reparations. Thank you.
All right. My last question is, for the persons in these colonial states that have benefited directly but have no wealth in the current present day, what do they give back to us as reparations? And is it sufficient? It's not.
First of all,
allow me to repeat the question if you want. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure. Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
Repeat the question. All right. I'm saying that individuals from colonial states, if they do not have the wealth that they benefited from, or if they have died, what reparations is sufficient to address the very system of slavery?
Well, as the CARICOM 10-point plan has stated, reparations can also include a formal apology. So that is a form of reparations that those individuals can provide. But additionally, it's not just those individuals alone that are required to pay reparations. The massive companies and corporations and institutions today, which are very wealthy and are very able to pay any kind of monetary compensation, like the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, or the Church of England, wealthy institutions that are very much able to pay. Or, for example, Unilever, Guinness, or the British royal family, the House of Hanover, the House of Windsor, the House of Stuart, the Gladstone family, and the Beckford family still own a significant amount of that wealth that was gained during those times. So it's not
Thank
to
you.
say
That's the
we
end
have
of our questioning.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much to both teams for this exciting cross-examination segment. We're going to now pause for 1 minute, and at the end of the 1 minute, we'll resume with the reply speech rather, from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, and then the debate will conclude with a similar similar response rather from the third speaker of Montego Bay High School for Girls. The 1 minute pause has elapsed, and we now make welcome the third speaker from St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. Let's make that speaker welcome. Hear, hear.
Sorry, thank
Again,
you.
calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Overall, it is undeniable that reparations should not be a state obligation due to the multitude of reasons that my teammates have provided. Governments played a limited role in the institution of slavery. Due to the old representative system, the individuals of the plantocracy created a great amount of the legislation and upheld the system of slavery. They were in charge of the treatment of the enslaved people. They were also in charge of many of the laws which actively affected the enslaved people, and therefore descendants of this plantocracy should be held accountable rather than the government that played a much smaller role in the actual control of the enslaved. Thank you. The corporations, including banks, insurance companies, and businesses, also should pay reparations as they benefited greatly from slavery. These people benefited more than any, these companies benefited more than any taxpayer that is living in any European country that could possibly pay reparations. Some corporations have already decided to give a formal apology and pay reparations, and this is much easier to acquire than a state paying reparations. There is no way to ensure that governments will pay without physical force, which in the Caribbean, we are simply unable to provide. Are we going to pull our armies together and shout for the European countries to pay us reparations? That will not work. We will not win, and they will take from us until we are left at an even lower point in society than we already are. There is no way to force these countries into paying reparations, and therefore we must focus on the individuals who we can actively link to slavery for paying of reparations. Some countries have even outright decided that they will not pay reparations. And therefore, what can we do when we are faced with this dilemma? We go to individuals. Additionally, many taxpayers who don't necessarily owe reparations will be expected to pay. There are many migrants in European countries, and these people, they're simply expected to pay for the exploitation that hurt their own ancestors. Not fair in any capacity. It should be traced to people who are specifically exploiting. It should not be placed on the backs of those who are already exploited. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for that speech. I now invite the final speaker from T Montego Bay High School for Girls to conclude the debate overall.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay. We aren't saying that European states are already legally obligated. We argue that they should be, keyword, should be. Honorable adjudicators, esteemed audience, and our dear opposition, who have tried, failed, and fled in their desperate attempts to escape accountability. Today, we end this debate with one undeniable truth. Reparations for slavery must be a state obligation because only states have the power, the resources, and the legal responsibility to repair the destruction they themselves orchestrated. But before I bury the opposition's case 6 feet deep under, let's take a moment to reflect on what they are truly suggesting. They keep harping on about the British government and how impactful has that been in the present day, I may ask? What have we seen in terms of real change? Absolutely nothing. If they genuinely cared about righting the wrongs of the past, they would have taken action a long time ago. But the fact that we're even still having this debate shows that the British government blatant failure to act. And let's be clear, the CARICOM 10-point plan is aimed at states, not individual. The royal family is the state. They belong to the state. Their money is the state's money. That is state obligation. This makes it crystal clear that the responsibility lies with the state, not the individuals who were carrying out orders. Governments have the power to address these wrongs, and they must step up now. Their continued inaction of the British government is a disgrace. And we're here today because they refuse to take charge when it matters the most. It is time for the state to take responsibility. Let me step into the shoe of an adjudicator for a moment and show you exactly where this debate turned and where team opposition absolutely left opposition in ruins. From the very start, the opposition failed to challenge our premise. We define reparations holistically, not just as financial handouts, but as a structured, state-driven effort to repair economic, social, and cultural damage. The opposition failed to properly engage with this argument. They remain stuck in this false narrative of individual payments and checks, ignoring the vast systematic changes that reparations require. This was their first fatal mistake. The argument about legal enforcement in the colonies was carried out by individuals, not directly the British government. This is an outright deflection. The individuals enforcing colonial laws, whether judges, soldiers, or officials, operated under British authority, executing policies crafted by the government. The British Crown appointed governors, established legal frameworks, and dictated the use of force. Every act of enforcement was a direct extension of British rule. Blaming individuals while ignoring the system that empowered them is a weak attempt to absolve the British government of responsibility. Opposition, if you're going to claim that individual reparations can be legally enforced, you're admitting that there are legal systems in place to hold accountable those responsible for harm. No. Who is ultimately responsible for colonial exploitation? The British government. By your own logic, if individuals can be forced to pay reparations, then the government, which is designed, maintained, and profited from the colonial system, is even more legally bound to do so. Your argument doesn't weaken our case. It actually demolishes it and makes the British government's obligation to pay reparations even clearer. They failed to refute our moral and legal arguments. We asked if slavery was state-sanctioned, why should the remedy not be state-sanctioned? They had no meaningful response. Instead, they hid behind vague claims about individual generosity, while ignoring the historical fact that slavery was institutional, legal, and enforced by governments. They mentioned that the government were not directly involved. That argument is completely flawed. The British government was directly involved in colonial rule through it appointed governors, legislative councils, and economic policies that dictated how colonies were run. The all representative system was merely a facade. Colonial government had limited power, and any decision that threatened British interests was quickly suppressed. The government controlled taxation, trade, and military force, ensuring that colonial policies served Britain's agenda. To claim that the government was not directly involved ignores the very structure of colonial rule, where every major decision ultimately had to align with British authority. Team Proposition has won this debate because we did not just argue for reparations. We demanded justice with a clear, enforceable path forward. We shattered the opposition's weak premise that individual obligation could ever equate to real structural reparations. They danced around accountability relying on vague voluntary contributions, while we prove that only state-led initiative can correct the systematic atrocities of slavery. They don't understand that reparations are charity. They are owed justice. The truth is, the state built its wealth on the backs of our ancestors, and it is the state's responsibility to fix the devastation it caused. The opposition's arguments were weak, half-baked, and irrelevant to the true question at hand. Our stance is clear, and it is undeniable. The state must pay, and today we prove that. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the third speakers and all the debaters in this match. At this time, we, the adjudicators, will go to deliberate and we'll return shortly, hopefully shortly, with the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Rena Parker.
My name is Hanessa Clayton, the team captain.
My name is Michaela Brown.
And I am a part of the debate team at the Montego Bay High School for Girls,
located in Montego Bay, St. James, Jamaica.
Reparations matter to us because history isn't just about something we study.
The impact of colonialism and slavery still exists in modern-day society.
This well-established and deserved opportunity is one that is capable of rebuilding my nation.
Jamaica, like so many other nations, still feels the scars of colonialism and slavery.
I'm not the only one who can acknowledge the significance of this means of restitution. Reparations matter to everyone who has that opportunity for impact.
They represent justice for the past and hope for the future.
Reparations represents accountability and justice, and this is why reparations matter.
Reparations are not just about righting the wrongs of the past. They're about securing justice for the future. Let us be the voices that challenge, inspire, and create meaningful change. Choose Montego Bay High. MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO.
We are St. Joseph's Convent, Florida, Spain. When you look at us 5 girls, what do you see? All coming from different ways of life and backgrounds. However, we are all converged here in this moment, not by chance, but from a series of intricate and purposeful decisions. Decisions made by people much more powerful than you will ever be, driven by greed, glory, God, and the hunt for gold. This is why reparations are so important, to right the wrongs of the past. Thank you.
The Center for Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this International Reparation Debate Competition. This International Reparation Debate Competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparations so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional stroke international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end, it left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I am a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just culture, it was spiritual, because you took me away from everything. Who then must I look up to? Who then must I emulate? Who then must I kill myself in order to elevate you?
What is common about the wealth? A flag raises high, but the strings still pull from London. We sing our anthems in borrowed tongues, march to the beat of siphons' drums, celebrating a freedom that still pays tribute. Independent? What is that when the governor's shadow still lingers? They tell us, we free. Tell that to the bones at Reparation. The 196 who fought and won only to drown in chains. Our Negmawan. Do the people of North Devon not hear the howls raging for their home? The tide spits their cries, their names foam in fury, salted by a sea that will not forget. They call us independent, yet a crown still sits above 14 nations, still bent at the knee, still ruled by a throne built from our gold. They took our labor, snatched our names, they welcomed our craft, then cast us adrift. Windrush mothers, fathers, exiled from the empire they built. What is common about the wealth? Our persistent potency that perseveres through acute artistry. We carve language into legacy, turn sorrow into song, drum resistance as rhythm, sink steel into symphony. We are the architects of new worlds, the poets, the painters, the prophets, who make home in remnants still, who forge futures from fractured pasts. They took the wealth, but we are the riches.
And remember that chattel slavery of the African people was also genocide. This is not highlighted sufficiently. If you take my home island of Barbados in the Caribbean, the British brought 600,000 people into Barbados. 600,000 Africans were brought into Barbados. The black population of Barbados today is 280,000. How do you reduce 600,000 to 290,000 after 200 years? They brought 3 million into Jamaica. At the end of the slavery malarkey, there were just about 600,000. The survival rate of African people in the Caribbean was about 17%. It was horrendous.
The Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community.
But I will say to you, therefore, that the issue of reparations
for the transatlantic slavery is an issue that we will take up with you, and that the appropriate apology and compensation is paid, and that the international community accepts that this should never happen again.
And yes, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, slavery is a crime against humanity.
The concept of reparations would take the question of development repair, and it would be multi-generational. What needs to happen is face-to-face discussions, which we deem as absolutely important, because if you can't see me or hear me, it is not appropriate to be able to make a judgment as to who or what I am and what I should receive.
Progress also means reparatory justice to heal historical wounds and climate justice to secure our future. We must be bold, demand what is old, and build a Caribbean that thrives.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are about to hear the results for the match that just ensued. If you missed it, you missed quite an enthralling contest, but we are ready to give the announcement. But before the announcement, a bit of analysis. Just to remind you, the motion looked at the question of whether or not we should be prioritizing or emphasizing placing a responsibility on the state, or should it be the individual companies, individuals in their personal capacity, as being most responsible for slavery and for ultimately for reparations. So we had two teams, Montego Bay High School for Girls up against St. Joseph Convent, Port of Spain. And of course, the argumentation was really, really rich. Want to applaud both teams from the get-go on doing a very good job. Lots of research, lots of evidence brought to bear. We got from Montego Bay High School this idea that governments are particularly responsible because on two grounds. One, they established the legal framework by which slavery was permitted, and two, they also themselves were active participants and beneficiaries of slavery, right? St. Joseph's Port of Convent, Port of Spain, tells us that individuals by and large are the greatest beneficiaries of enslavement, and in many instances, parameters established by the governments in terms of trying to prevent them from doing excessive torturous activities to enslaved Africans were totally disregarded, and the violations were egregious beyond the parameters established by the state. They tell us further that the individual having extracted benefits that are oftentimes existent in conventional times currently, that reflects a sort of benefit that they're gaining for which they should repay, and therefore the obligation is greater on them to compensate for the horrors of slavery through reparations. So first of all, a bit of a concern that we have as a panel. Montego Bay High School telling us that governments are most responsible because they establish a legislative framework. We wanted to hear that this legislative framework and the establishment thereof has a particular moral worth. Not necessarily you must put quantification to it, but sort of explain to us qualitatively what is the significance of this contribution by government to the existence of slavery. At the same time, there was a fair amount of contestation around the pragmatics of a policy that would see the state paying reparations or the individual company or individuals in their personal capacity paying reparations, right? We felt that this contestation, though rich and though an interesting point of contention between both teams, we don't think that either team particularly wins this particular tension. So we think that in the status quo, as was highlighted by St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, that governments are very much reluctant to pay reparations. And of course, while we welcome the examples of Germany paying reparations to Israel and ultimately considering reparations to Namibia, we felt that by and large, the vast majority of states are reluctant to accept responsibility fully, to the extent that they're unprepared to apologize, and furthermore, they're unprepared as well to go the extra mile to do the compensatory activities that are demanded by the CARICOM reparations plan, right? But we think that similar concerns exist in the world where we would be placing that demand on companies and individuals. While individual companies have, in some circumstances, paid reparations, as is the case with countries who have, in some instances, paid reparations. Case in point, Germany paying reparations to Israel for the atrocities of the Holocaust. We think that by and large, it is difficult, and we didn't get a kind of a mechanization or kind of an explanation as to how the Caribbean countries would place a demand that would lead to reparations flowing from companies at large. So on that basis, we think that that particular tension or contention about the mechanization of either approach, it was not sufficiently proven by either team. We felt, though, that the team that wins the debate is a team that proves marginally that there is a greater moral obligation for the side that they believe, or the entity, the stakeholder that they believe should pay reparations, that they proved that there's a marginally greater justification for this to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the team that wins with 276 points as compared to the team that loses, their points being 271 points. The winner of this match is the sixth match in the International Reparations Debate Competition for 2025 is Montego Bay High School for Girls.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Congratulations to Montego Bay High School for Girls, and very well tried, St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain. Congratulations on a very valiant effort.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just want to advise the teams that, well, certainly St. Joseph's in this case, that don't lose heart, because we're going to be bringing back some high quality teams back into the competition. And who knows, you might be one of those teams. So stay tuned, listen out for information as to whether or not you have been selected to be a wild card for the next round. The best debater in this match comes to us as well from the winning team. That debater, the first speaker from Team Montego Bay High School for Girls, the Prime Minister. Thank you very much. All the best, everyone. And of course, please stay tuned, because more matches will be forthcoming tomorrow, and Friday rounds out the round one of the competition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.